Athletor Podcast, and I am super stoked. Gabe Dean is joining us today, and I got to tell you, I've been wanting to speak to you for the last 2 or so years just to see what it's like to be a civilian now. like you're in the regular world now, man. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming on and spend some time with us. But what's it like being in the civilian world now?
Well, no, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Always enjoy talking to you, Mike. So, it's different. I'll tell you that. A lot different than being an athlete and a coach. You actually have real responsibilities out here. So
crazy talk.
It's funny because I still have plenty of relationships in the coaching world, and it's like, what is it like out there? What's the, because they've been in this confined bubble, for most of their career, but it's different. The workouts, the intensity, everything is obviously dropped off considerably compared to being in a wrestling room. So you're just really trying to maintain at this point and not get too out of shape and continue to move business along. So,
well, you say that, right? You run a self-storage business. Is that correct?
Yeah, we focus heavily in self-storage. We've gotten into, we're really just kind of a real estate holding company at this point. We've gotten into some other asset classes. But yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this, what similarities do you find from, let's say, being an athlete first to being in the business world?
I think just the tenacity of, getting after it every day. And when, you're in the business world and an entrepreneur and, you're building something, it's a grind, a different kind of grind than maybe what you're used to, physically in the wrestling room, but the same kind of mentality. So, and I would just say and there's a lot of ups and downs. I mean, there's a wave of, what's a great day? Oh, it was a tougher day today. So just being able to handle all that as an athlete and learn how to handle that and you can transfer that very well to, in a startup business and get something off the ground. So
you said the bubble, and that's something that not a lot of coaches will talk about. Being in the NCAA wrestling world is very much a bubble. There are it's like people don't realize oh, there's this whole other world out there. Eric Guerrero and I are pretty close. He got out of coaching for a long time and was running, multiple different businesses. And one of the things that he I don't want to put words in his mouth, but one of the things that he and I spoke about at length was you take for granted a lot of the things that are simply given to you as a coach at a high level institution like you were at Cornell. Somebody pays for your car in some instances. Somebody pays for your housing in some instances. And so it's you have to get out into this real world. So what would you tell somebody who is maybe a bit trepidatious about getting into the real world? What would you tell them to expect that they might not be expecting?
Just that, the grass is not greener. It's not, you kind of, you're right. When you're in an institutional setting, there's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to worry about where your next paycheck's coming from. You don't have to worry about a lot of overhead expenses, right? You're more doing a job. You get to really completely focus your time and energy on executing just a job task list. Then when you get into the outside world, granted, you don't go and work for a corporate company that's already established. That's probably actually pretty similar in terms of not having to worry about capitalizing something. I'd say the difference is if you're going to go out to the real world and start a company or start a business or get something off the ground, I'd say the capitalization, and it depends on what business you're starting to. You know, if you're going to go run a coffee shop, it's probably a lot more simpler than you know, trying to capitalize, you know, a real estate development company and a real estate holding company where, you know, there's a lot of money moving around. So and just, you know, you're building a staff and the timing of bringing people in and making sure, you know, you're working towards cash flow positive and getting the sales adequate and building that, you know, there's just all these crazy moving parts where you're responsible to building a team. And when you're a college wrestling coach, you're responsible for that too. You know, there's fundraising, there's recruiting, there's, you know, putting those pieces together, but it's a different kind of stress when you have to do all of that plus be driving capitalization. And I think that's probably the biggest difference, you know, between if you're going to go out in the real world and start a business, and especially if it's very capital intensive.
How did you acclimate to that? Like, was it for you specifically? Was it a simple acclimation, or did it take some time?
No, it took some time. They're just and a lot of just the same thing. Like, and I think probably wrestling helped with this too. Just like a lot of running at the wall and getting smacked down, and then, you know, okay, that didn't work. All right, let's try this. All right, that worked, but that didn't. So we need to adjust this. And that really didn't work. So we need to just completely X that, you know. And it's just like every day, especially at the beginning, when it's like you're trying to figure out your systems, you're trying to strategically find great people to build around. You know, that's what's made our business successful. Is we've actually been very fortunate enough to build around very just hardworking, disciplined people. A lot of them from my wrestling network. I'd say the overwhelming majority. So that it's so much trial and error, and it's like when you get when you're a freshman in the college wrestling room the first time, you're just like, oh my God, I'm just like literally getting my ass kicked every day. I have to adjust, you know, pretty much everything.
Everything, right? That was the thing for me. I'm like, I suck at everything. I'm like, how do I suck at everything? I thought it was all right. I suck at everything.
And that's like, you have to that's why it's so important to have the humility to understand, like, you're not going to be good. You're not going to be good for a long time. You're not going to have all the answers right away. And it's like, that's what's so tough for people that get into college wrestling. I know that, and in the business world, if they're doing in a startup, is if you are looking for self-gratification, one, don't go into college wrestling, and two, don't try to start your own business. So it's not
just stay away from it.
It's like, you know, I hear like young kids talk about, I just really want to own my own business, and I'm like, hey man, if you really do, don't be in it for any self-gratifying moments, because it's not going to come for a long time.
Yeah, nobody cares.
Nobody cares, and it's extremely humbling. So,
yeah. Well, can you give me an instance though, real quick?
Just
well, no, I mean like something that you ran your head into the wall against, and you really had to pivot hard, because like, I know with coaching, it's like, for me, coaching, like there were certain fundamental things that I really thought that I had to address, and that turns out it didn't really matter that much. And it took me running my head into the wall a few times. Is there something in business that you can remember, like running your head into the wall a few times and going, maybe I should just abandon this?
Yeah. So when we initially launched the company, we were going heavily into like retail. And you know, you got to move, you know, when you're in steel production and making a product that you know, has a very high cost associated with it. There's a certain volume production that you need to reach in order for it to, you know, cash flow to make sense. So, you know, so it's not like you have a lot of time to figure out how to move, like, you know, hundreds of steel frame, you know, storage units. So we went into retail initially, and to move them adequately, we were going to trade shows every weekend, just trade show. at RV, campground, backyard lifestyle, you name it, we went to it. Even if it didn't even make sense, we went to it. And we were just, the sales were just not there. We were selling them, but it wasn't like to the volume that we needed to get to. And then I, one of our good friends of mine owns an extremely large roofing company, and they do door-to-door sales. So it's like, okay, well, trade shows don't work. Let's try selling these things door to door. And that's that really didn't work.
That really sucked.
Well, one, it's extremely awkward to like go up to someone's door in the first place and like try to sell them something. And then especially when it's just like, hey, do you need more space in your house? Will you sell, do you want to buy like this 8x12.5 steel framed steel storage unit? And they're like, no, I've never even, they're used to like
that roofs. Was a problem. I didn't really.
Yeah. They're used to like roofs and like, knives and stuff like that. Like, more practical items, but yeah, I think so. Like we sold actually like, I think 2, but, and in the first day we did it, we sold 2 and we were like, oh my God, this is going to work, and then like the next like 2 weeks after that were just a complete, just dumpster fire. So then I was like, oh my gosh, how are we going to achieve volume production? And then I was like, just through kind of being in the, you got to be in there failing over and over again to like figure it out, really. I mean, and so I was like, well, what if we start buying like existing real estate assets that are storage, and then we add these units to them, and we use a construction line of credit with the original mortgage purchase to scale these things that are 100% full or 98% full to increase our increase valuation on the real estate side, and then also move them volume production and capitalize and shift more into a real estate development company. And the real estate holding company and the development company will kind of capitalize each other. And then when we switched into that, finally that was like, oh, that really works. But yeah, through definitely some serious trial and error. So
would you say that it's harder to win a national title or harder to run your own business?
Yeah, so this is I was actually not too long ago, I was asked that question, and I think that it's hard to it's a great question. It's hard to compare. I think like the difference is like the opportunities to like win a national title and everything that has to like go like perfectly right into doing that is obviously much like business. You don't want to fail too much and go like obviously go bankrupt, but you can be like, you can be in there figuring it out and for a little while before like you have to close down or it's actually working. You only get 4 chances, and in that tournament, like as you guys know, I mean anything can happen. It happens every year, and I think like I think that winning a national title is probably more difficult because of everything that has to go right, and all the and the very little opportunities in retrospect of your life that you get to do that. But I would say starting and running a business is extremely complicated.
I love how understated you are about it, because I know exactly what you're talking about. You're like, it's exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, it's different. Like you go to wrestling practice, and maybe if you lift that day too, or you go for a run, that's like maybe 3 to 4 hours of your day. When you start, and still, we're still in startup mode. I mean, we're still like, driving and going a million miles an hour. At least we know what we are now. But we're, 14, 16, sometimes 18-hour days, over and over and over again. It's just a different type of grind, and you're responsible for every, if you started the business and you're running the business, you built and we have a staff now, we have employees, we have We own things in, multiple states. We're developing things in multiple states. So you have all kinds of different personalities that you're managing. And then, you put together, you build a board, and the board, you're just working with the board and big decision making. And I think that it's really difficult, and I just don't like seeing all the pump up stuff of like, yeah, you build this business in like 2 days and you've made it. It's like, no, that's not true for anybody. It takes a lot. It takes time, and it's a different kind of grind.
Yeah. Hey, so if you were to talk to someone that's thinking about starting a business, maybe it's not even anything having to do with the type of business that you're running, what would be like a top like 2 or 3 things that you would tell them to identify and run at first, right? Like you mentioned, at least we know what we are now, right? Like, so for me, that was like the number one, because people will ask me for advice online and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Like that for me was always the question that I would rebuttal with. So if you had to give some advice to young people that are going to start a business, what are the top 2 or 3 things that they have to figure out first before they start running in any direction?
Well, I would say like the first thing is like really to your point, like, you really why are we doing this? And what are we trying to accomplish with this idea? Because everything just starts as an idea. And you might not be perfectly clear on it at first, but you definitely need to try to figure that out quickly. If you're not passionate about it and you don't care about it, then it's probably not going to end up well. So I'd say one is like really understanding like why and what you're doing is extremely important. And then like the second piece of advice I would say is like just really be clear, like you're not going to be able to do it on your own. I mean, you really need to build a team and a staff and a board of governors that really offset your weaknesses, and be very clear on what your weaknesses are. It's okay. I mean, we're all human beings. Like we all have our things. So just don't try to build it on your own. Delegate and bring. At first you're doing everything, but as you get it going and get it off the ground, like bring. Focus on not a resume, but focus on character when you're bringing people in. You pretty much, unless you're a doctor or an engineer or something like that, you can, in the business world, you can teach any hard worker, the majority of skill sets on how to do something. So just really bring in people that work extremely hard, that will be there in the trenches with you, nonstop to get this thing where it needs to be. And just really bring those people need to offset your weaknesses. And be very clear on what your weaknesses are. I think those things are probably like the most important at the start. And then once you have a staff that you need to be able to delegate. If you're typically the founder typically becomes like the CEO of the company. So your focus should really shift towards, once you have that team in place, to growth. How are we going to continue to grow? How are we going to, and focus on growth, and let your, operational staff, your day-to-day, handle, those things. And that took me a while to get my hands off about, when you're doing everything at the beginning, you're building them, you're taking sales calls, you're doing all those kinds of things. You're so used to that, but once you get those systems in place, you got to be able to delegate, and trust in the people that you brought in. So,
how's wrestling prepared you for all of the challenges that you're currently dealing with?
I mean, just wrestling, just the amount of adversity in wrestling is so high, and I don't think people, unless you've really wrestled like for a little while, you don't really understand like all the challenges that come into wrestling, both mentally, emotionally, physically. And the same applies to starting a company. Like I said, there's going to be like awesome days, and then there's going to be like really tough days, think that it seems like almost everything's going sideways. And that's very true in wrestling too. So like, you come in, and even when I was like established in wrestling, I was, 1-2-time national champ, like I'd come in and I'd have bad days, I'd be off, and I wouldn't, I'd get, you just have bad days, and that's very similar to business too. So, and you want to keep everything kind of like right here at all times. You don't want to get too high when things are good, and you don't want to get too low when things are bad. There's going to be that adversity is going to face you every day, and especially if you get something big enough and going, big enough in the business world, there's going to be good and bad every day. I mean, there's going to be highs, and there's going to be like, oh man, shoot, we got to address that. But I would say that's what wrestling, like the adversity side of wrestling, is really comparable to the business world.
What are some of the weaknesses that you found in yourself that you didn't know you had going into the business world?
That's a great question. Well, one, I think I don't think like I was an extremely intelligent businessman at all when I first started. I mean, I was like pretty bad. So like my business understanding of like business financials, and like, how to read a P&L, and how to look at a balance sheet, and like how to like really understand like EBITDA and cash flow, and like how all that works together, it was awful. So like one of like a second grader when I first got into it. So I think that like one of my weaknesses was, which luckily, my mom is a CPA and actually our CFO now. So we brought her on full time, and so luckily I had someone like in-house that could really teach me on like, hey, how do you read a financial statement? How do you look at an income statement? How do you look at a balance sheet? How do we?
What is this spreadsheet you're talking about?
Yeah. She's like, and she knows all that stuff. She's worked with small business clients and hundreds of them over the years. Has run her own practice. So we, it was just like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like we're in negative EBITDA right now? Like, what's that? That's not even like, she's like, what's net income? Like is really bad, but like, like EBITDA is a good like value of like how the business is actually operating. If you're reinvesting and growing a business, net income's not going to look great for a while. Come to find out. And
as it turns out, they were right about that too.
So like when you're like growing a business, you really want to be like focused on revenue and EBITDA. So it's like, well, okay. So like right now, if like EBITDA is negative, like that's like really bad, because like that means net income's like really, really bad. Yeah, Gabe, that's that. Yeah, we need to, you need to adjust this. So I think like one of like my biggest weaknesses was just like not understanding. I graduated from Cornell as a business degree. I didn't understand any of that. So that, as humbling as that is, so like just understanding how to like read basic financials, like, I think that was one thing. And then I think like the other thing, was like in wrestling, like I just really had to like worry about, I mean, not that I didn't like, help my teammates or try to, but I only really had to worry about like myself. Like I just, all my preparation, discipline, the way I ate, the way I slept, the way I trained, the way I lived my day-to-day life, it was like, well, it's just me. Like I just had to make sure I'm in like my top performance condition. And in business, it's like, well, that's just not the case at all. And I think like I have maybe more of like a natural, like, and I didn't realize this, but like natural, like controlling personality. So like I was just so used to like everything being perfectly in line with me, and like business is just chaos. And especially when you have like a bunch of people involved, and it's like you cannot try to control those people like that. Just like it kills the morale, it kills the ingenuity and the creativity of like, if you bring talented people in, they're going to have like really good ideas, and like you need to sit there and listen to them. And I can't
stifle them by
right. You want them to actually like go out and like try things, and like even if they like it didn't work, like it's like you want them to like feel secure that they can go try that, or attempt this or do this, without like feeling like they're just going to get like hammered. So I think like that at the beginning was like really something that I had to learn quickly because like I don't want to be I don't want to be a controlling personality. I was just used to it
Sure.
because I was focused controlling everything in my life that had a direct impact on my result. So so I think those two things were probably the biggest adjustment for me: delegating, letting hands off, not controlling, and then also just like intellectual knowledge, which I lacked. So
even with the Ivy degree.
Yeah, I mean that's just like a nice title to have next to your name, I guess. I'm sure I'm sure it's up to me. It was my maybe I mean I graduated with a 3.3 GPA at Cornell. Like I wasn't like a bad student by any means, but maybe my more focus on the mat maybe overlook some of those financial modeling classes that I should have been paying more attention in. So
I don't know.
Hey, so as part of kind of the podcast, I did a little bit of research and I noticed that you put out on social media a little while back. You said the principles and values kids learn from wrestling and sports can be more important in today's world. We have to encourage development, stop making it about only winning and losing at this level. You're doing kids a disservice. Can you tell me kind of what prompted you to kind of put that out in the world? And, maybe have you always thought about the sport of wrestling in that way?
Yeah, well, I think like the whole the misconception of like what sports are really probably meant for and what they should be used for, and it starts with the parents, so like I've been to plenty of youth wrestling events, and I'm sure I know you guys have too, and it's it's just sad where some of these parents are making everything about winning and losing, and it kind of goes back to just like what I said with like building my staff and taking my hand, letting them go out and just figure it out and try things. I think sports need to be looked at as like more of a development tool. And I was lucky enough to have a mother and father that really understood that. We're really unassuming. My dad was like, "Hey, I want them to wrestle, and I hope they do wrestle." And he was manipulative. He'd bring us into the wrestling room, let us run around, and
100%.
Yeah,
we knew exactly what we were doing.
Yeah,
100%.
And I don't blame him for that at all. Like I'm going to be too.
Yeah.
But like he never looked at like, it wasn't like us about like, we never went to Tulsa anyways, but it wasn't like us about going and like winning like 18 Tulsa national championships and like that being like a really like we need like. It's funny because like when you see like kids that are driven so hard so young, it's like it's very easy to see that it's not about the kid, it's about like the dad. And it's usually like a dad that didn't even wrestle in high school and maybe like wrestled 1 year in middle school or something, and he's just trying to like fill something in his ego. But what happens is like this disconnect between like, hey, like the rest of your life, like sports are like very temporary, compared to like you live to be 80 years old. It's maybe you're lucky if it's like a fourth of your life. And I just think that they're amazing to like create adversity in a young person. We need adversity. We need failure. You need to go through that as a kid. Like it's super important because like the rest of your life's going to be made up of that. And, it's like what you do with those things, like as you get older and, are you going to just be someone that like fails and then tries this thing, then fails and goes to this thing and fail. And like, it's just going to be like, you're just gonna be like hopping around, or is it going to be like something where you're like, no, well, I just got my ass kicked, but like, I'm going to come back and adjust and do, and, get better the next day. And like, that's what sports are so wonderful for to provide like a platform of that, like development for kids. And I mean, I think we're getting away from that actually.
More and more. Yeah.
Yeah, more and more. And it's concerning, it's like, like the number one like job that kids want is like social media influencer now, and it's like, the platform, and especially wrestling, because it's just you and another guy, so the level of accountability, like you can be a great football player and still lose the football game, but have an amazing game. Like the level of accountability that comes with wrestling is I mean, I think it's the best of any sport. So, but when you see the parents driving just the result, you know, at such a young age, you know, you're talking like 5, 6. Nobody has ever asked me like, hey, Gabe, like, how many times did you win Fargo? You know, like, I've never been asked that ever, you know, like, how many state titles did you win? The only time I get asked that is to prove a point. Like, I won 1 state title in my junior year. I didn't even win my, you know, in the finals my senior year. It's to more prove a point. And it's like, when you drive your kids so hard, so young about results, you get not only do you get like the disconnect from what the platform of sports is really about, but you also get, you know, you're damaging your relationship with your son or daughter. So.
100%. And now it might sometimes be damaging the relationship with the sport, might be damaging the relationship with a coach, might be, but you're going to damage a relationship 100%. You know, I know you meant that you're probably damaging the relationship with the father and son, but it can be multiple relationships that are just thrashed because you had to have a kid win Tulsa kickoff.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds so ridiculous. Man, it really does. I like, my son's a 5-time Tulsa national champ, and it's like, oh wow, you know, that's great. I've been, you know, it's like, I mean, there's so many crazy parents out there that you just like, you know, you see them all the time, and especially when I was coaching at Cornell, it's like your son's like 17 years old, and like stop talking about how many times you won Tulsa when he was 12. You know, it's like, it doesn't matter. What matters is like, he's out there, he's competing, he's trying, and he's adjusting along the way and developing and getting better. You know, like that's what competition is good for. Like, who cares what they've won or what they've done? Right now, it's all just a good process for your kids to go through. And I just see it all the time. I see it all the time. You know, my dad obviously, you know, runs New Way, and you know, all those events, you know, that I see, that, you know, when I pop in and check everything out, and I just think it's really sad. Thankfully, because I mean, when I was a kid, I just wanted like my dad to be, you know, my dad to be really proud of me. Like, that's all that I cared about. Like, I didn't even care if I won.
That's not there's no difference than in any other kid. They just want their dad's approval.
Yeah.
And then that carrot gets consistently moved on them. And it's, you're missing the freaking point of being a dad now. You're not just missing the point of like of wrestling or sports. You're missing the point of being unconditional for your kid. Yes. And that is a big problem. Like, that for me is a huge problem.
Yeah, 100%. And I didn't care if I won or lost. Like, the only thing why winning mattered was because I felt like my dad would be proud of me. But like, in reality, like, every time I lost, which we lost a ton, we lost more than we won. I mean, everybody does when they start wrestling, and our childhood wrestling resumes are, you know, me and my brother, when I say are not anything to show off, that's for sure. So but like, it was like, after we lost or we had a tough day, it's like, hey, let's just like go grab an ice cream cone, you know, like, let's like, he put an arm around us and tell us how proud he was of us to, you know, go out there and compete. And that just means the world to you when you're that young. And like, I'm just like super grateful that he understood that, because like, I could have gone down probably a lot of rough paths as a kid if I didn't have like the proper guidance. To your point, like, that kids naturally just want their parents to be proud of them. That's just like the way that we're genetically coded as human beings. So, and to your point as well, like, if you have a really bad relationship between your children, it also affects like their other relationships in their life, like, pretty drastically. So I'm like pretty passionate about like that message, because you know, just like, that's what it should be about when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you know, 13, 14 years old. That's just like what it should be about. You know, you want your kids to feel confident going out in the world and taking risks and like going for things, and feel like, okay, I can come home even if it didn't go well, and everybody still loves me and cares about me, you know.
Yeah,
So
we do milkshakes after tough ones.
half the time, why you go to practice is because you're waiting to get the milkshake. After.
That's right. That's right. We do milkshakes. God knows there have been a lot of milkshakes in Tulsa. There have been a lot of milkshakes. Like we will. Shake Shack is put in business by half the family.
You're keeping the lights on in Shake Shack.
That's it.
Yeah.
Hey, truth be told, man. In full disclosure, Joel and I, when we were talking about having you on the podcast, we were kicking around the idea of, for the first time, having two guests, and really what we wanted was to have you and your dad on. Now, I kind of, in my own head, vetoed that just because I did want to get into your business endeavors a little bit as well. But I think it's something that we should do in the future, and for a number of different reasons. But first and foremost, what are the things, and I'm sure that he would have a really entertaining take on this as well, but what are the things that he did as a dad and high-level wrestling coach to get you interested in the sport without you knowing it?
Well, and it would be awesome to hear his perspective, and I think it's a great idea. I mean, maybe even having all three of us on.
We could do that, Joel.
Yeah. Because like even Max has like a different perspective than what I do, because I was the oldest and he's the middle child, and he had to deal with like other stresses and pressures too, like of in his position. So it'd be really, it'd be really good. And my dad's a great interview. He's spoke plenty of times. So but I would say like the first thing was like, and I as early as I can remember, like when I was like maybe like 4 or 5 years old, like, you'd be walking by the kitchen and he'd like grab my wrist, like just like grab it, and he'd be like, "All right, get away," and so I would just be doing everything I could, like get his hand off my wrist.
And by the way, he's a shaved ape too. Like
yeah. My wrist was like this big back then, and he's his big old clomps, just come out. So I'm like, I'm like hanging on it like a tree, just like trying to like kick it off and stuff. Or like, we'd be sitting there on a couch and he'd be like, "Hey, get up," and then like he'd like jump down on my leg. And he's like, "All right," like, you try to get away, and we just like, I just remember as early as like, it seems like almost as early as I could even like walk, he was like doing stuff like that with Max and I. And then like he was coaching at Michigan State when we were born. So like he would take us on the bus trips. He'd say, "All right," like he got us little suits and clip-on ties, and we'd get on the bus with all the guys, and the guys were just amazing to us, Rashad Evans was on that, Gray Maynard was on those teams back then. And they taught us how to play euchre, when we're driving to State College and they're wrestling Penn State and we're sitting there, and just all the different things. So we probably learned a little too much, sometimes.
Sometimes what happens on the back of the varsity.
So but like we would run around. There was like the pull-up bars in like the Michigan State wrestling room, and like my dad would pick us up and let us hang on those, and we'd love that, and we'd be like crawling around on those. And I think just like no competing, nothing, just like doing those things and like letting us come on the bus trips, and like they were cool enough to like let us speak to the team sometimes, like, "Hey, like they gave me like this, I still have it actually, it's tucked away somewhere, but they gave me like the littlest coach award. I was like 5, and they like, they made this little plaque for me when I was a little kid, and they'd be like, "Hey, Coach Gabe, do you have anything you want to say to the team?" And I just, I always loved that, like, yeah, you go out there, kick their butts, but like I just think there was no competing. It was just like that for a very long time, for like years. And so we just were like, "Man, this is a lot of fun." We looked up to those guys. They were like our heroes, Sure. And he'd go to the duels and, stand there on the side of the platform with our elbows. There's pictures of me when I'm little, had my elbows on the platform at, Jennison Fieldhouse watching the duels. So just a bunch of stuff like that. But I'm sure he'd have probably more details.
Sure. Well, I can tell you this. My wife is very astute. She figured out quickly that, like, I would tell my dad, I'd be like, "I don't care if he wrestles." And to a certain degree, it was true. If my son decided never to wrestle, don't really care that much. Did I want them to? Yes, of course. But I always thought that number one, like you said, road trips, that's a big deal, right? Because especially people that don't make a living out of this dopey sport like I have, you know, those are the things that you remember. It's the trips with your buddies. So that's yeah, of course. But number two, I always wanted the wrestling room to be a place of joy, not a place of suffering. I remember going into wrestling rooms. A guy, rest his soul, a guy named Vern. He had like this credo on the wall of like, this is a place of only work, and you will blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm sitting there going, well, where do they enjoy it? Like, at what point do they enjoy this? You know?
And so bad enough that we always put in like the last bottom row of the basement, and it's like got no windows, and you know, it's like 6 foot tall ceilings. So it's why is like every wrestling room like that? You know, I don't, no natural lighting, you know, it's just hot.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Hot, you know, so it's just like it's hard to associate anything fun with that. You know, and actually that's one of the things I love about Cornell is like we had the big Freeman Center that had natural lighting in it, you know, 20 foot tall ceilings. It was just like, oh, this is nice, you know, because to your point, like every wrestling room seems to be in a dungeon type setting.
Yes, and that was for a long time by design. Like that was like, do you remember? Like I can remember.
Oh
so
yeah.
I okay. So I went to Oklahoma State when Gallagher, like, so the wrestling room was at literally in the basement of Gallagher Arena. It was a long hallway, and it was, I don't know, 7-8 foot ceilings, right? And it was that all the time. There was literally a sauna in the room. Okay, unbelievable. So, but then when they're building the new room, I can remember coaches talking about, well, the ceiling's got to be low. I'm like, why?
Like, and I think everything was like centered around cutting weight, you know, and it's like,
yes,
the only way to cut weight is to be in dungeon type wrestling rooms. And it's like, well, there's a lot of different ways you can cut weight, you know? So like
crazy thought, maybe we don't cut as much weight.
Yeah. Hey, like, you know, back in the day, everybody's cutting like 30 pounds, you know, it's like, hey, let's maybe like not do that. It seems actually extremely unhealthy. So yeah, to your point, like I would say I think it was just way too centered about cutting a ton of weight, which isn't fun. Like, cutting weight is not fun. If anybody tells you they enjoy cutting weight, they're full of shit. So I would say like that is a great point too. It's like, why do we cut so much weight? Like it's just, and especially like when I see little kids cutting weight, I'm like, what are we doing? Like he's 7 years old. Why you got him cut down 10 pounds? He doesn't even have an ounce of body fat on him. He's just a little kid, you know?
I truly hope that we're getting, and I say this as a pretty sincere optimist. I truly hope that we're getting away from it. Because it was deplorable for a really long time. There are things that I saw as a young coach that if I saw today, I would probably alert the authorities.
But yeah, it's borderline child abuse, and so I mean, it is child abuse.
It's child abuse. Let's call it what it is.
For sure. You should really not cut weight till you get into college wrestling. And even when you're in college wrestling, I think you should cut minimal weight. Mm-hmm. I've seen guys cut so much weight, it destroyed their careers. Mm-hmm. And especially if you started at that young of an age, I mean, you're just going to make that kid hate the sport. Mm-hmm. So I agree. I really hope we're getting away from it too. I'm not a fan at all of the weight cutting side of our sport. I can understand it at a certain level when you get to the college and Olympic level at a certain level, keywords, but it should be you shouldn't even be allowed to do it high school or below, in my opinion.
You talked a lot about the long-term development of, you know, a wrestler and, you know, having sustainable practices as part of that. But you also have had a lot of success, you know, in high school and, you know, college. And how do you balance the focus on long-term development, not trying not to worry too much about winning and losing, with the fact that, hey, if I want to go to college and wrestle, there are certain accomplishments that I need to get along the way?
One, I'd say play multiple sports if you can. I'm a big component of that. You know, I played football more months out of the year than I wrestled in high school. And I honestly, I liked football more. I was better at football than I was wrestling at high scholl. And
Really?
I was a much better football player than I was a wrestler in high school. In my opinion, I had definitely more accolades. So I'm a big component of that, because you need a break. You know, wrestling is like so hard, so you need like a good switch up. You know, like, all right, I don't think you should do it year round. You know, so I played football, and football was like my fun. Well, heck, I wanted to play football in college till I was going into my senior year. Realized you needed to be probably above 6 foot tall to probably
helps at Division I level.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm definitely not going to be like the next Cam Newton. So I think I should probably wrestle, and the football recruiting humbled me pretty quickly in that. But I think the big thing is like play multiple sports. I think 2 sports is good. 3 sports is a lot to take on now. But I think two sports is good, just to kind of switch the gears a little bit and give you a little, mental break from one another. And then really put yourself around really great mentors too, that during the really hard times, they're guiding you in the right direction and mentally. I think there's we talk about how wrestling is such a mental sport, and it's as cliche as it is, it's true. And so you want to consistently be working on the development of your mind as you are physically. But I'd say and doing multiple things, it helps that. I was a quarterback in high school, so dealing with the pressures of 7,000-8,000 people on a Friday night, where they think, well, football is everything, life or death, and having message boards talk about how bad I sucked that game, when you're 15 years old, dealing with that kind of stuff, is it that's a good thing, because I remember walking to Carrboro Hawkeye Arena. I'm about to wrestle. I was about to wrestle Sam Brooks, and a woman in a wheelchair, tells me to go F myself, and it doesn't even faze me, So you gotta be in this. You gotta put yourself out there to at a young age to be exposed to multiple things and multiple hostile environments, and but that's why it's so important to have great mentors too, because you don't know how to handle that when you're 15 and you get a message board sent to you that's Gabe Dean sucks at football benching, you're 15 and you're well, I don't suck, or in the bottom of a pile, and some 250-pound defensive ends punching you in the ribs repeatedly, and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? It's just the chaos environments are actually good, when you're young, so and not just having it in one area, football was a really good balance for me to deal with the pressures and stresses and anxiety of the world. I remember having a bad game, and I go sit on the bench, and the people are yelling over the, we had a track barrier between the field and us, thank God.
Thank goodness.
And I remember people yelling take off your pads, Dean, you suck, get out of here, all this stuff. And it's just that's as terrible as that seems when you're 15 or 16 years old. It's also great at the same time to learn how to deal with some of that stuff. So I think I know that was a long-winded answer, but playing football and wrestling for me was a really healthy thing, because when I was able to take all my time and focus it on wrestling, my upside was ridiculously high, because if they could get me straightened out and disciplined just and focused in one area, I had all this learning curve, because I didn't do it full time. And like I said, I played football more than I wrestled every year, probably in high school. So,
all right, we're running thin on time right now, so I'm gonna rattle off a couple questions for you, and I want you to try and answer them as quickly as possible without thinking.
Okay, all right. I'll do my best.
Okay, best wrestling shoe ever.
Asics Cal.
Really?
Wow, I'm surprised by that too.
That's good.
I wore Asics Burrows in college, so I should have gone the Burrows route, but I went Cal. All right,
rock on. All right, cool. Is it better for a young athlete to be short and stocky or long and lanky when it comes to wrestling?
Long and lanky.
Why?
Your toolbox is way wider, and that's speaking from a short and stocky guy.
Sure.
So like, yeah, I would kill to be like David Taylor or Cal Sanderson.
That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, toolbox is way wider.
Max is a little more wiry than you, huh?
Yeah, we're like, it's weird, we're brothers, but we're like, maybe, I don't even know. Some people think we look alike. Some people we think not at all, but like, we're definitely built a lot different.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Okay. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change one thing about the sport of wrestling, what would it be?
Push out rule. No more stalling.
Really?
I can't stand the subjectivity to stalling. It's driving me insane. They just and the problem is now is like they only call stalling when you get pushed out of bounds.
So what are we doing?
Like they're stalling in the middle of the mat too. Like, like you can call it now. But they're like the only way we call stalling is if someone pushes somebody out of bounds, and then in some cases they're like call stalling on the guy that's pushing the guy out of bounds. So I'm like, just get rid of it. Push out rule like freestyle 1 point.
Black and white. Make it easy. Got it. Okay. This is a tough one. This is a tough one.
All right.
Who's on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
Oh, that is a good one. Well, first and foremost, I'd say Cal Sanderson. Impossible to argue that. Dude literally didn't lose in college. Never been done before. I don't know if it'll ever be done again. But has literally accomplished everything in the sport of wrestling. Olympic gold medalist. Now he's won, X amount of national titles as a head coach. Definitely Cal. Dake, just because 4 national titles in 4 different weight classes. That's pretty nuts. He's got, Olympic bronze, multiple world championships to back that up on the international level. And I'm biased. I spent a lot of time with Kyle, so I don't want to feed his ego too much. But yeah. You
don't think he needs it?
Yeah, no, I don't think he needs it. Yeah. So Dake, John Smith, 100%. I guess I'm listing all American wrestlers right now.
Well, again, Mount Rushmore, all Americans.
Yeah. So like, I can't like bring like Russians and stuff into this.
Probably not.
It's like they don't have a Mount Rushmore. So so definitely John Smith. 2-time Olympic gold, 4-time. Just ridiculous resume there. And was it 4? Is it 4?
Yeah, 4. One more.
This
is where everyone gets tripped up, by the way. Everyone can rattle on.
Did I like the last one, and I think most people would be like say it's got to be Jordan Burroughs because of it is incredible what he's accomplished. But I'm actually going to go out on a limb here, and I am going to go with, because I am just extremely impressed with the dominance level at the world level, and I think David Taylor's making a case for himself.
Oh, I 100% agree.
I mean, how do you hit and tech everybody in the world, dude? It's freaking incredible what the guys.
It's funny. And P.S. If we had a 32, is he 32 or 33?
He's definitely. So when I was a freshman, he was a senior. So I'm 29. Therefore, he's probably 33 years old. Yeah.
Okay. If we had a 33-year-old athlete tech and pin their way through the world championships 15 years ago, if I would have told you that, you'd say I was crazy. But not only is he doing it, he's getting better. He's getting
every year
better. He's getting freaking better. And it's like, what are we even talking about? It's not like it's a bum weight class. It's 86 kilo.
No. And he's just smoking like probably arguably one of the pound for pound best wrestlers in the world every time in the finals, and arguably probably one of the best wrestlers of all time. He's on the list. He's got to be in the top 10 to 20, right?
100%, dude.
And
100%.
he's just running through them every time now. And I don't see how you can't. I think David Taylor's made a case for himself. I really do. The dominance is just incredibly impressive from his level.
Awesome. Gabe Dean, thank you so much for coming on, brother. We really appreciate it. And hope to talk to you soon.
Appreciate it too. Talk to you soon, guys.